The forum Boarium reeked of wet earth and livestock. Under an open sky, 3 pairs of armored combatants entered a makeshift fighting pit. These were not soldiers, but slaves conditioned to kill for the appeasement of the dead, not for acclaim. The year was 264 BC, and Decimus Junius Brutus Sceva had just laid his father to rest. To commemorate the event, he organized what the Roman historian Livy would later identify as the first gladiatorial contest in Rome. This was no public amusement. It was a funerary rite amunus, or duty, owed to the departed. The combatant's blood was not spilt for entertainment, but as a grave tribute. This private ceremony, originating from the Campanian tradition of human sacrifice at burial sites, rapidly evolved. In southern Italy, particularly in cities like Capua, these sanguinary rituals were already transforming. The Samnites, former adversaries of Rome, had long featured warrior duels during commemorative feasts. In time, ritual slaughter morphed into ritual combat. The outcome became secondary to the contest itself. It was, as the Christian writer Tertullian noted, a shedding of blood for the solace of the dead, yet one that progressively captivated the living. By the late 3rd century BC, these duels transitioned from funerals to festivals. No longer restricted to solemn occasions, they became a staple of Rome's expanding schedule of ludi state-sanctioned games. Initially religious, the ludi Romani were celebrated to honor Jupiter, often in periods of turmoil. The Senate, seeking to avert divine retribution or secure celestial favor, would authorize funding, elevating the games from a personal matter of mourning to an affair of the state. This shift from familial rite to civic spectacle was gradual but decisive. The Senate's role expanded, with magistrates, notably aediles, leveraging these events to cultivate public favor. Bloodshed became a political instrument, death a performance. By the close of the Republic, provisional wooden stages were supplanted by permanent stone amphitheaters. A somber ritual in a muddy marketplace had been institutionalized by the Roman state, regulated, scheduled, and financed by public funds. Thus, with every drop of blood that stained the sand, the state inscribed a new form of law, not on tablets, but in stone. The iron gate groaned, casting the crowd into silence. A solitary figure emerged from the darkened tunnel, barefoot and sparsely clad, armed only with a short blade. Across the sand, a cage door lifted. A lion, its ribs stark against its matted coat, stepped into the light-starved, sharp, and coiled with predatory intent. This was not a duel, but a state-sanctioned execution, designed for public titillation. By the 1st century CE, Roman arenas were venues not only for human combat, but also for forced confrontations between man and beast. Known as venations when staged as hunts, or damnatio ad bestias as a form of execution, these spectacles were engineered to dissolve the boundary between punishment and entertainment. The condemned criminals, prisoners of war, and rebellious slaves were pitted against lions, leopards, or bears, often emaciated to guarantee a swift and brutal conclusion. The practice had deeper origins. During the late Republic, commanders like Pompey recognized the political currency of such displays, orchestrating elaborate shows where men were set against animals, a theater of blood. That served as both penalty and spectacle. The more sensational the death, the greater the perceived triumph of the state. Not all who confronted the beasts were criminals. Some were bestiarii, trained fighters compelled or paid to engage wild animals for the crowd's diversion. Mosaics and reliefs from the early empire chronicle these scenes in stark detail. A figure with a spear poised against a lunging lion. A net wielder evading the claws of a panther. A 1st century CE relief captures a fighter, eye to eye with a charging beast, immortalized in sculpted dread. These were not mere artistic renderings. In Ramon Britain, archaeologists discovered the pelvis of a man, likely a gladiator, bearing deep bite marks consistent with the jaw of a large feline, a silent testament to his death in combat. across the empire, from the Colosseum to provincial amphitheaters. This ritual of blood was ceaselessly reenacted. The philosopher Seneca, writing in the 1st century CE, noted that some prisoners chose suicide over a death designed for public amusement, a final, silent act of defiance in a system crafted to deny them all control. What transpired in the arena was more than violence. It was methodical degradation. Hunger was honed into an instrument. Beasts were starved not just to ensure a kill, but to heighten the suspense, to hold the crowd in breathless anticipation as man met claw, fang, and destiny. In Rome, law and spectacle were intertwined, and the roar of a lion was not merely nature's cry, it was the voice of authority, alternately fed and famished to serve the state. The water shimmered under the Roman sun, its tranquility momentary. Then the thunder of drums and the blare of war horns shattered the calm as two fleets converged on a man-made lake. On the decks of triremes stood soldiers armed with spears and catapults, their conflict observed by thousands from stone tiers, not riverbanks. This was not warfare. It was performance. The Romans called these spectacles naumachia, mock naval battles, staged not on distant seas, but in meticulously constructed basins, often at imperial command. Julius Caesar orchestrated the first in 46 BC, excavating an artificial lake near the Tiber to reenact a clash between Tyrian and Egyptian fleets. The ships were real, the weapons were real, and the combatants condemned prisoners fought not as performers, but as soldiers without prospect of survival. The scale of these events escalated. Augustus, Caesar's successor, commissioned an immense basin in 02 BC, so large it necessitated its own aqueduct, the Aqua Alsitina, for filling. There, 30 warships, manned by thousands of convicts, engaged in a deadly struggle. The magnitude was astounding, the message unequivocal. Rome's dominion extended not just over armies, but over nature itself. At times, these aquatic displays transcended artificial lakes. In AD 52, Emperor Claudius drained the Fucine Lake and commemorated the feat with a naumachia. The combatants are said to have greeted him with the now famous words, "Morituri te salutant." Those who are about to die salute you. Whether scripted or spontaneous, the phrase encapsulates the stark fatalism of men condemned to die for public amusement. By the inauguration of the Colosseum under Titus, naumachia had become emblematic of imperial power. Some historians suggest that Titus may have utilized Augustus' nearby basin for naval battles during the amphitheater's dedication ceremonies, and later, under Domitian, similar spectacles may have been staged within the Colosseum itself, its arena floor temporarily flooded to host miniaturized maritime carnage. The tradition persisted under Trajan, who, a century after Caesar, constructed the Naumachia Vaticana in AD 109, a massive flooded arena near the Vatican Hill, where further battles of spectacle and death were enacted before roaring crowds. Each naumachia was more than a performance. It was a demonstration of absolute control over water, over men, over an empire. In these choreographed wars, Rome did not simply reenact conquest. It ritualized its domination, deriving power from the illusion that war itself could be staged and yet remain absolute. By the grand opening of the Colosseum in Aetia, executions had transcended mere punishment to become theatrical productions. Emperors, starting with Titus, utilized the midday interval between gladiatorial contests to present mythological tortures. These were not symbolic reenactments, but actual deaths, meticulously designed to mirror the fates of legendary figures. The poet Martial, an observer of these inaugural games, chronicled the events. He described a figure of Orpheus entering the arena, ostensibly to charm wild beasts with his lyre. But unlike the myth, where nature succumbs to his music, the arena's animals remained unmoved. A bear mauled the performer on cue. In another scene, a man portraying Daedalus, the mythical inventor who flew on wings of wax, was torn apart by a different beast. Marshall cynically commented, "How you must wish you had your real feathers now." One of the most unsettling performances was the myth of Pasiphae, the Cretan queen cursed with lust for a bull. Roman audiences witnessed a woman, or perhaps a condemned man in disguise, subjected to a beast in a perverse imitation of her fate. Fire also served as a tool of spectacle. The tunica molesta, a garment saturated with pitch, was affixed to the condemned and ignited. This was sometimes presented as the death of Mucius Scaevola, the Roman hero who demonstrated his resolve by thrusting his hand into a fire. Whether the victim was cast as Scaevola or another fiery martyr, the outcome was the same: screams swallowed by applause. Tertullian, writing as a Christian under Roman dominion, vehemently described how victims were burned alive, bound to posts, and derided as actors in a torturous play. These mythological executions were not about narrating stories. They were about asserting control through ritual. Rome did not just execute its condemned. It transformed their deaths into echoes of divine retribution, offering the audience not justice, but a debased form of catharsis. As legends were resurrected in blood and flame, the distinction between theater and execution dissolved. In the Roman arena, myth was not merely recounted, it was relived. Rome's arenas converted ritual into policy and spectacle into an instrument of state. Blood on sand, water, and fire created a culture that equated power with the choreography of death, the echoes of which still resonate in every discussion of violence and entertainment. As Seneca wrote in his letters, "I come home more greedy, more ambitious, more voluptuous, and even more cruel and inhuman, because I have been among human beings."